So, here's a thought. What if humans, us, what if we aren't the first advanced civilization to walk the Earth? And I don't mean aliens showing up, I mean like right here, on Earth, but millions and millions of years ago.
It's a pretty wild idea, isn't it? That's basically the heart of the Silurian Hypothesis.
Right.
It's really a thought experiment that some scientists came up with to ask, well, could we even tell if there was some ancient civilization? Would modern science have any way of finding evidence?
And the name Silurian, that rings a bell. It's from TV, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a nod to Doctor Who.
Okay.
In the show, the Silurians were this advanced reptilian species from Earth's past, way before humans. So the name's kind of borrowed from fiction.
Gotcha. But the idea itself, the actual hypothesis, is serious science.
Well, serious in the sense that it was formally proposed back in 2018 by an astrophysicist, Adam Frank, and a climate scientist, Gavin Schmidt. They basically just asked this big what if. If some other industrial society existed way back, what traces might it leave in the geology? And could we actually spot them today?
So that's what we're doing in this deep dive then, exploring this whole idea.
Pretty much. We want to take you through, the facts, the implications, what makes it tick. It's a journey back through deep time, really.
A shortcut to understanding this intriguing concept.
Exactly.
So where do you even start? What makes this idea possible? I mean, beyond just saying, what if?
Right. Well, the first thing is just the sheer amount of time. Geological time it's vast. We're talking hundreds of millions of years where something could potentially have happened.
Okay, so there's enough time. What about resources? Like, could they have powered anything?
That's a key point Frank and Schmidt made. They looked at fossil fuels, basically. And they argued there's been enough fossil carbon around, coal, oil, gas, to power an industrial civilization, maybe something like ours, going way back, even as far back as the Carboniferous period.
Wow, how long ago was that?
That's roughly 350 million years ago. So the basic energy potential, it's been there for an incredibly long time.
Okay, so time, check.
Yeah.
Energy, check. But why haven't we found anything then? Like ruins or tools? Why is direct evidence so hard to come by?
Yeah, that's the huge challenge. First off, fossilization itself is just incredibly rare.
Right.
Think about how many billions of creatures have lived and died, and how few actually become fossils. Now imagine trying to fossilize something artificial, like a machine or a building. It's even less likely to happen perfectly.
Okay, so stuff just doesn't preserve well. What about just finding the places they might have lived?
Well, that's the other problem. Earth's surface is constantly changing. Most of the land surface we can actually see and study today is relatively young, geologically speaking.
How young?
Mostly from the Quaternary period. That only goes back about maybe 2.5 million years.
So anything older is...
It's either buried, like really deep, or it's just gone, recycled.
Recycled. You mean like mountains eroding, continents moving?
That's exactly. Erosion, tectonic activity. These are super powerful forces over millions of years. They're like a giant planetary eraser, constantly scrubbing the surface clean and reshaping everything.
Wow. Okay, so finding an ancient city is pretty much a non-starter then.
The odds are astronomically low, yeah.
So if direct evidence is basically off the table, what are we left with? What kind of indirect clues could possibly survive all that time and planetary churning?
Right, so Frank and Schmidt focused on things that might leave a global signature, something recorded in the rock layers themselves. One big one is climate change.
Climate change is like ancient global warming.
Potentially, yeah, or cooling, but specifically rapid changes. Think about the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, the ppm.
Okay.
That was around 55 million years ago, a really significant fast spike in global temperatures. Now that one's thought to be natural, but an event like that, a sudden dramatic shift, that could hypothetically be a sign of an industrial civilization's impact, like, dumping tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere quickly.
So we're looking for a sudden blip in the long-term climate record, a kind of unnatural spike.
Exactly, a geochemical fingerprint. And that ties into the next idea, looking for weird things in the sediment layers.
Weird things like, what, chemical anomalies?
They suggest looking for unusual concentrations of chemicals. Maybe things that look like residue from artificial fertilizers, pointing towards advanced agriculture, perhaps.
Okay. What else? You mentioned fingerprints.
This is where it gets really cool, I think. Isotope ratios.
Isotopes, like different versions of elements. How does that work?
So certain industrial processes, especially nuclear ones, can alter the natural ratios of isotopes in materials. The best real-world analogy they point to is oak glue.
Oklo in Gabon, the natural nuclear reactors.
That's the one. About 2 billion years ago, conditions were just right for natural nuclear fission to occur there.
Wow.
Now, the really unstable stuff produced back then, the transuranic elements, they've all decayed away. But what we can still detect today is the leftover signature. There's less uranium-235 than you'd expect.
Because it was used up in the fission.
Exactly. And the ratios of other stable isotopes that were products of that fission are totally unique, anomalous. It's a clear fingerprint that tells us complex nuclear reactions happened there billions of years ago.
That's incredible. So the idea is an artificial process, like maybe industrial scale nuclear power or even weapons, might leave a similar but distinct isotopic fingerprint that could last millions of years.
That's the hypothesis. It's a subtle clue, buried in the chemistry of ancient rocks, but potentially detectable.
Okay, that's mind-bending. What about slightly more tangible stuff, even if it's buried?
They do mention the possibility, though again it's a long shot, of finding highly resistant technological residues. Think certain types of plastics maybe, or even contained nuclear waste buried deep underground, or maybe preserved on the deep ocean floor where conditions are more stable.
Right, less disturbance down there. And they also looked beyond Earth, didn't they?
Yeah, they floated the idea that if such a civilization became spacefaring, they might have left stuff elsewhere, like artifacts on the moon or Mars.
Why would it be easier to find things there?
Well, think about it. No oceans, no rain, much less erosion generally, and no active plate tectonics like Earth has.
Oh, okay. So things just sit there.
Pretty much. The moon and Mars are much better at preserving ancient surfaces and anything left on them. They're like geological museums compared to Earth's dynamic environment.
So paradoxically, the best place to look for evidence of an ancient Earth civilization might be off Earth.
That is quite the paradox.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've talked about how it might be possible, why it's hard to find evidence, and what subtle clues we could look for, but didn't you say the authors themselves, Frank and Schmidt, are pretty skeptical?
Oh yeah, they state quite clearly they strongly doubt there actually was a previous industrial civilization.
So why do all this? What's the point of the whole exercise if they don't really think it happened?
That's the really important nuance here. Their main goal wasn't really to find Silurians. It was that asking the question formally, scientifically, forces us to think differently.
It raises, as they put it, useful questions for two big fields. One is astrobiology, how we should look for signs of life, especially technological life, on other planets. What kind of planetary scale signatures should we be searching for?
Okay, so it helps refine the search for aliens. What's the other field?
Anthropocene studies. That's the study of our own human impact on the planet. The Silurian Hypothesis forces us to confront the deep time legacy of our own civilization. What kind of mark are we leaving in the geological record right now? Will it be detectable millions of years from now?
Wow, that puts things in perspective. Makes you think about our own history too, right? Like modern humans have been around for what, 300,000 years?
Roughly, yeah. Homo sapiens.
But our whole industrial high-tech phase, that's just the last couple of centuries, really. A tiny, tiny blip on the geological radar.
Exactly. It highlights how brief our own intense planetary impact has been so far, compared to the vastness of Earth's history.
It's interesting, too, how this whole idea came about. You said Frank is an astrophysicist and Schmidt is a climate scientist.
Yeah. Apparently, Frank first went to Schmidt, wanting to discuss how we might detect alien civilizations by looking for climate change signals on exoplanets. Maybe analyzing atmospheres, or hypothetical ice cores, or tree rings from other worlds.
Okay.
And somewhere in that discussion, they kind of realized, hang on, could we apply this same thinking to Earth's own past? And the Silurian Hypothesis was born. It really shows how ideas can cross between different scientific fields.
It's not just science thinking about this, though, is it? We mentioned Doctor Who, but this idea of ancient non-human intelligence pops up elsewhere.
Oh, definitely. Pop culture loves this stuff. Besides the Silurians in Doctor Who back in 1970, there's a 1977 novel, Inherit the Stars, by James P. Hogan, that has a similar premise, finding evidence of an ancient race, though I think there were aliens found on the moon in that one.
Okay.
Larry Niven wrote a short story in 1980, The Green Marauder. That one's pretty dark. An ancient alien visits Earth and encounters an anaerobic civilization, like before oxygen was common, and they're apparently terrified of chlorophyll, of plants taking over.
That's a twist.
Yeah. And there was another one, Toolmaker Cohen, by John McLaughlin in '87, exploring humans meeting intelligent dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs, right. Which brings us to Star Trek.
Yep, Star Trek Voyager, the episode Distant Origin from 1997.
I remember that one, the Voth.
Exactly, the
Yeah.
Voth. A spacefaring race who, it turns out, evolved from hadrosaurs on Earth millions of years ago.
Right, and Chakotay guesses their civilization must have been on some isolated continent, and all traces got buried under miles of rock or ocean.
It perfectly captures that idea of deep time erasure that the actual Silurian hypothesis talks about. Popular culture has definitely been playing with these concepts for a while.
So wrapping this all up then, the Silurian hypothesis, it's this really provocative thought experiment. Can we find geological clues, indirect signs of an advanced civilization deep in Earth's past?
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
And maybe the biggest takeaway isn't whether they existed or not.
Right.
But that, just thinking about it scientifically, is incredibly useful. It makes us better at searching for life elsewhere in the universe, in astrobiology.
And it makes us think harder about ourselves.
Exactly. About our own impact, our own potential legacy written in the rocks of the planet. The Anthropocene.
It really does connect those dots. So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. If our own industrial world were to collapse tomorrow, what would our geological footprint really look like in, say, 1 million years? Or 50 million? Or 100 million?
And what does thinking about these potential ancient Silurians, real or not, suggest about our own responsibility? Our responsibility for the long-term story we're writing on this planet right now.
It's definitely something to chew on.